refused to remove Michael Savage's name from this list, even to this day. And it's a list of murderers and terrorists. Remember that. You may not like what I say, but I am not a murderer, nor am I a terrorist. Banned in Britain is Savage's answer to the British government and to his own country. His own country, which has completely ignored this blatant assault on one man's free speech and his liberties. This is a book for anyone who believes that no government should censor speech, nor use its power to intimidate people from speaking freely. And while this is a book where Michael Savage voices many of his conservative opinions, it is not a book just for conservatives. Free speech is at risk because powerful forces do not want to be criticized. The Department of Homeland Security is issuing reports that intimidate opposing political speech. These reports associate conservatism with terrorism. The Fairness Doctrine may be imposed in order to cripple talk radio. They're not calling it the Fairness Doctrine anymore. They're calling it localization. They're calling it diversity. Let me tell you something. The First Amendment is not being honored by the Obama administration. What do others say? Evgeny Morozov, Foreign Policy, says a decision to ban Savage from entering the UK triggered more than a viral tide. It triggered a viral tsunami. I didn't write that. He did. There are others. There are many others. I don't want to read every one of them. Here's Nancy Pelosi's quote. Conservative radio is a huge threat and political advantage for Republicans, and we have had to find a way to limit it. Nancy Pelosi quoted. You hear this? Can you believe this? We've talked about Obama's health care reform plan. We've talked about how expensive it is and how certain provisions seem to have darker intentions. Joining us now is Dr. Peter Breggin, who has some thoughts on the end-of-life counseling originally mentioned in the so-called health care reform.
President Obama's health care program will encourage and pay for end-of-life counseling. These counselors would be required to explain available services, including palliative care and hospice. Dr. Peter Breggin has strong feelings about all of this. Michael, before we can begin to understand the menace of end-of-life counseling, we need to think about the situation of people who are elderly, chronically ill, seriously injured, disabled, in persistent pain, or facing death. Here's the simple truth about every single person who will be approached by end-of-life counselors. He or she will be incredibly vulnerable to suggestion and to manipulation, and especially into being talked into wanting to die as efficiently as possible. Pain, disability, and the specter of death can provoke fear and anxiety. The possibility of becoming a burden to others or to society leads to feelings of shame and guilt. The elderly are susceptible to feeling suicidal, but so are the young adults who become disabled. When people no longer feel of value, they withdraw into loneliness. That, I believe, is the worst part of death, when it's lonely. The families of these patients are also vulnerable. Some will harbor anger and resentment toward their sick family siblings or parents. Some will find it unbearable to see mom or dad become frail and near to death. Some will feel overwhelmed by the pending loss. Now along comes the end-of-life counselor, the grim reaper disguised as a friend. Beneath the sham empathy will be what Obama calls his ruthless, non-ideological pragmatism. Believe your worst suspicions. Obama does not offer end-of-life counseling out of empathy. There is only one possible reason for promoting it in the midst of efforts to nationalize health care. That purpose is to reduce the cost of end-of-life medical care.
Well, what kind of medical experience as a doctor have informed your views on end-of-life counseling?
Began when I was young, an intern on a surgical ward, when one of my patients, a woman in her 60s, was suffering from a recurrence of cancer. She became deeply depressed, stopped eating, and wanted to die. But she was deeply loved by her grown children who did not want her to give up and to die. I talked to her about her family, about how much they loved her and how she could still share her love with them. I reassured her that she didn't have to look ahead to a lonely death. She let me sit on her bedside and feed her with a spoon to get her used to eating again. At the next visit from the family, she was no longer depressed and instead welcomed her children back into her life. Over the next several weeks or more, the family went on to share one of the most loving experiences of their entire lives. Under nationalized medical care, this woman would never be given the kind of time and effort that I was able to do. This woman would be given end-of-life counseling to hurry her along. No time or resources for a loving death. After all, beds and treatments would be in short supply. Since then, I've had 5 more decades of experience as a physician and psychiatrist. I am more convinced than ever that we can and must always devote ourselves to enhancing life and to bringing meaning to it at every stage.
Have you had personal experiences that have also informed your views?
My wife Ginger wants me to tell you this story. A year and a half ago, in preparation for major surgery, Ginger wanted to have general anesthesia. Instead, moments before the surgery, her doctors abruptly talked her into accepting an epidural, an injection of pain-killing medication into the region of the spinal nerves. Tragically, both she and I failed to take a strong stand against this unexpected last-minute demand for her to accept something that was against her expressed wishes. That's the first lesson, that at a vulnerable time, even a strong woman and her physician husband were susceptible to being pushed into accepting a procedure she definitively did not want. Then the anesthesiologist ran into difficulty positioning the needle, and he nicked a nerve root. The epidural was abandoned, and Ginger was given the general anesthesia that she originally wanted, but the damage had been done. Within seconds of starting to be awakened from the surgery, the pain in Ginger's leg and foot from the damaged nerve root became agonizing. She was given so much morphine to control the searing pain that it suppressed her breathing and reduced her blood oxygen to dangerously low levels. She spent the night in the ICU while I sat beside her to nudge her partially awake whenever she stopped breathing. For several months afterward, Ginger was heavily dosed on a combination of the latest pain medications and opiates. Nonetheless, every night I had to hold her in my arms while she wept from the pain before going to sleep. 18 months later, she has finally come off all pain medications. Although she continues to endure what she calls a bearable amount of pain, her life has once again become joyful. Ginger asked me to explain that the combination of demoralizing pain and mind-blunting drugs had made her enormously susceptible to despair. Without the love of her family, she might have done anything to end the pain. If she had been an older woman with only a few years ahead, she would have welcomed the inevitable advice of an end-of-life counselor. For me, Ginger's pain was another kind of agony. I turned to God in a way I had never before done in my life. Instead of the usual refrain with which I end my radio reports, I want to give my wife Ginger the last word. She wants me to tell you this. Embrace life. With all its hard, messy, painful moments, embrace life. You can listen to these radio reports and download the transcripts on www.breggin.com. That's BREGGIN.com.
Thanks, Dr. Breggin. This is the Savage Nation. With God's will and your listenership, I shall return.
Michael Savage. Afternoons 3 to 7 on Talk 910 KNEW and online at 910KNEW.com.